What's up everybody? Let's talk about the Russian Grand Prix. Of course, they're coming thick and fast at the moment. Just a few days after everybody returns from Singapore, they're straight on to Russia. For the teams, of course, they go straight from Singapore directly to Russia. Some of those team members will have come home, but literally for a day, maybe at the most. The whole infrastructure gets lifted up, flown, packed up into flight cases and boxes and sent immediately onto Russia. The operation, the logistics of races like this, where you've got to travel a long way and you've only got 7 days between events, or race events. Of course the event starts much shorter than that. There's only a few days between actual events. It's a real challenge for everybody concerned, so fair play to everybody involved in Formula 1 for making that happen, because of course when we all switch on our TVs at the weekend it looks seamless. Right, what can we say about Russia then? Sochi is one of those places that I mean, it's set, as we know, the race is set around the Olympic Park, but for me it always felt a little bit soulless. Yes, there's a little bit of history around there because of what's happened in that place before, but it's like a concrete jungle. It almost feels like Sochi was deserted after the Olympics finished and only kind of reignites itself when the Grand Prix rolls into town each year. You can go outside of Sochi, or certainly outside of the Olympic Village or the Olympic area, and you can find some really interesting places, and actually the coastline around that part of Russia is pretty beautiful. But the circuit itself and the immediate location of the circuit, pretty soulless. Lots of the teams stay in the old Olympic Village, designed of course for the athletes around that event. There's not a lot there, so it's not one of the favourite destinations for most people working in Formula 1. But the circuit itself, I think, is probably similar. It's a slightly nondescript circuit. It's got lots of corners that are very similar to each other. The circuit itself, the racetrack, is very sort of smooth. The degradation on the tyres is incredibly low. In fact, the way the tyres are worked around here, it's not a tough circuit on tyres. And in some senses that's good, because it means that generally drivers can push throughout every stint. You're not having to manage pace like we saw in Singapore, for example, so we shouldn't get that situation. But it will definitely be a one-stopper, because your tyres will easily make it to the end of the Grand Prix. If you remember back in, when was it, I want to say 2014, Nico Rosberg did pretty much the entire race on one set of tyres. That's how low deg it is. It's changed slightly, it's evolved slightly over the years, become slightly rougher, and you can actually see it. From having been there back in 2014 and going each year afterwards, you do start to notice that the circuit on a macro level starts to get little indentations, becomes a little bit rougher. The little pieces of aggregate from the tarmac start to just raise up or become protruded above the circuit's surface, and that adds a little bit of roughness in, but certainly nothing like some of the other circuits that we go to. So in terms of tyres, because of that, Pirelli have they actually brought the middle set of their range, so the middle three compounds of the 5 dry tyres. And that's actually one step harder than we saw last year. You might say, well, if there's almost no deg, why not bring the fastest, softest set of tyres? Which is almost what they did last year. What they've done this year is go one step harder in their selection choices, with the thinking being that it will allow people to push to the maximum throughout every stint. That's the way that Pirelli have looked at this. So hopefully that will encourage flat out racing, and hopefully no more of this pace management that's been so frustrating. So that's tyres. It's much more about longitudinal forces on the car, so it's about braking and traction events. Lots of right angled 90-degree corners around here, where it's about getting the car stopped under control and then getting traction out of those slow to medium speed corners. So the longitudinal forces are the ones that put most strain on the tyres, and actually, although they're not under huge strain, generally the tyres, the right front is actually the one that takes biggest punishment, because of all of these heavy braking events and then turning in under braking at relatively, or slowing down from great speed to slower speed and then turning in. It's the right front that actually takes most of the punishment. Tyres though shouldn't really be too much of an issue. Quite a selection difference in a few of the teams in what they've brought to this particular circuit. I noticed yesterday that Daniel Ricciardo's only brought one set of the medium tyres, which seems like a strange one, because for me that feels like that and the soft would be the 2 race tyres. But we'll have to see how that plays out. And of course the weather can have a huge bearing on that. There is unpredictable weather forecast for this weekend. So rain, of course, can change everything. We're going to have a proper look at the circuit on this thing in just a moment. But in terms of what it does for the cars, it's because the circuit is much smoother than places like Singapore. The ride heights can be lowered again from the Singapore setups. The suspension can be stiffened up a little bit because you don't have to cope with so many lumps and bumps. There's some long straights here. The main straight is a very long straight, and you'd imagine it should sort of lend itself to really good overtaking opportunities, and it does to a certain extent, but that really relies on, through the final sector of the lap, which is all the slow corners, the really tight twisty stuff, you've got to stay close to the car in front to be able to get that good exit out onto the main straight to be within striking distance. And it's that following closely through the tight and twisty section at the end of the lap which is the tricky bit. So actually overtaking can be harder than you imagine around this circuit. It's the longest race of the year in terms of distance. It is the least incline, interestingly, so the flattest circuit of the year on the calendar as well. I think something like 1.9 metres is all there is in terms of incline over the course of this lap. It's the longest run down to turn 1 as well, over 1 kilometre from the start line down into turn 1, and that means that the start performance has got to be crucial. Getting a good launch off the line, because the start is a really big opportunity for making up places. We'll get into it in a moment, but turn 3, of course, that really long left-hander that seems to go on forever, is actually the corner of all of the corners on the entire calendar that puts the most prolonged G-force through a car and therefore through its driver. It's a little bit like the old turn 8 at Istanbul, isn't it, that everybody loved. There are lots of different lines through it, multiple apexes, quite a difficult corner to get right because you are absolutely flat out all the way through there. So interesting in many ways, dull in some other ways. But in terms of the race, because there are so many factors like weather that's so changeable, I do think we could be in for an interesting one. And with the people like Ferrari having brought so many upgrades to Singapore that seem to be giving the car a wider operating window in terms of its setup, actually we might well see them do well here and it'd be much closer at the front. So let's see. Let's have a little look at this circuit then. So, getting a good exit out that final corner then is crucial to getting onto this straight, the start-finish straight. Remember I said this is the longest run down towards this first corner. DRS wide open through the kink, still DRS flat all the way down here, and then really late on the brakes and turning into this chicane, straight lining it as best you can, using the curbs to some extent, and then coming out wide, because now we get into this turn 3. I've got the green line on here to show you the preferred line, preferred racing line, but it's so hard to actually stick to that at maximum speed when you're relying on the downforce of the car to keep you stuck to the road, trying to hug the apex as you go through, and the car just wants to push off to the right hand side. There's a right angle corner at the bottom of there, and then we are flat again all the way down here. Lots of bursts of accelerator and then stomping on the brakes, another 90-degree corner. Flat again through here then as the circuit kinks around to the right, a little bit similar to the first one. Hard on the brakes, another 90-degree corner. So many 90-degree corners through here. Bring it over to the right hand side, you can see the Olympic Village, the Olympic Park over to the left and beyond in the distance, and then we come into what is actually a really tricky part of the lap, some slower corners coming up that really do start to test the brakes and the traction out of these corners. Getting traction down, getting the power down is absolutely critical, because otherwise you just get swallowed up along these straights. Another DRS zone here. If you don't get that traction out of that final corner, this is the place where you're going to lose a lot of places. Really tricky braking zone here because you're flat and turning at the same time, trying to get the car slowed down. And then a very quick section of a right, then a left, running it out wide but not too far, jumping on the brakes here, and look how the circuit rises up to a little crest here. And if I come back just a little bit, look at that. You can't even see the apex of the corner that you're turning into because of that little rise, that little crest. a really difficult one to get right because you can't see the apex curve that you're aiming for on the way in. Of course, the race drivers don't have this nice handy green line on the circuit to show them where to go. So that is a tricky one to get right, and then of course you're straight into this right-hander, running it nice and tight on the inside, out wide on the left-hand side, but look at that concrete wall if you get it wrong. Final part of the lap then, a couple of 90-degree corners again where braking and traction absolutely key, and then we're back onto this straight, and that closes out a lap of the Sochi Autodrome. So it's quite a cool track. I would say perhaps slightly less demanding than many others, both in terms of what it puts through the car itself, but also in terms of mastering it as a driver. I think there are a less demanding set of corners. Lots of them are very similar, lots of them are very straightforward. But having said that, of course, being the best in Formula One is about pushing everything to the absolute limit. So if you've got a slightly easier set of corners, circuit layout wise, you've still got to get the maximum out of it, and that's when it comes down to the tiny little finite elements. One thing that's that I've just seen pop up on my phone actually while I'm doing the video is that the Red Bull and Toro Rosso guys are all going to be taking power unit penalties this weekend in terms of grid drops, changing elements, and this is all designed to allow Honda to bring their latest brand new power unit developments to the Japanese Grand Prix, of course, their home race. It will mean an awful lot to Honda to put on a good showing around Suzuka, and they think they can do that by taking some pain in Russia and maximising what they can do next time out in Japan. So let's see how that plays out. But it does mean that people like Max Verstappen are going to be hurt immediately from the start by taking a 5-place grid penalty. That launch though off the line, as I said, going to be crucial. You can easily recover some grid place loss on that long run down to turn 1 as long as you have a good launch off the line. So that will mean soft tyres for qualifying will give you that better launch, of course, off the line. A little bit more grip with a softer tyre than you have with a medium tyre. And then opening up everything you've got from the power unit to give you a push alongside your rival, slipstreaming as much as you can down towards that first corner. But anything you can make up at the start is going to be hugely beneficial, because once you get into racing, it becomes a lot harder. Anyway, that's the Russian Grand Prix. I still think it's going to be a good one. Don't forget, slightly earlier times, I think, than normal, isn't it, because of Russia? But I think it should be a good one. As I say, weather could definitely play a part. And because it's the Russian Grand Prix, I have a very special Russian Grand Prix related prize from the gpbox.com to give away this week. This time it comes from a company called Auto Design Prints, and I think you're going to like it. Oh, sorry, Pharrell. Sorry. I just threw the box off the table and it landed on the dog. Sorry, mate. He was sleeping, bless him. Sorry, buddy. Okay, this prize then is a good one. It actually looks really, really good. It's from Auto Design Prints, as I say. It is obviously the Sochi Autodrome, the Russian Grand Prix circuit. And what happens here is they cut out, laser cutting from this ultra black card, the circuit layout shape. It's got little directional arrows in there showing you which way round they go. And in the background, on this particular version, it has a gold background inlay which shows you the circuit itself. And you can really get a picture of that. Look at that big turn 3 that comes down here, goes on forever. But a really, really nice piece. When you see it up close, it's even better than seeing it through your computer screen, because the precision of the laser cutting just makes it look really professional. Also, if you can see that there with the light. Now, they have asked me this week, because they are not big on Twitter, if we can do the competition on Instagram. We haven't done one on Instagram for a while. Now, I apologise if lots of you are not on Instagram. I'm trying to spread these things around through Twitter, Instagram, YouTube and other places as well. This week it's going to be on Instagram, so if you haven't got an Instagram account but you really want this, just go and make one. Probably only takes you about 30 seconds. If you're not on Instagram and you don't want to add an account, well then maybe this one's not for you. But if you'd like to win this, it's very easy. This is how you do it. I'm going to put a post on my Instagram, that's F1 Elvis. If you're not following me, why not? If you're not following me, go and follow me on Instagram now. It's at F1 Elvis. I'm going to put a post on my Instagram of this week's prize. I would like you to like it, first of all, but then also I'd like you to tell me who you think is going to win the Russian Grand Prix this weekend. Perhaps give me a little explanation. Why, who's going to win it and why? And I'd like you to tag in me, of course, but also Auto Design Prints on Instagram and, of course, the GP box. I'll put all of this in the description, all of their tags. I'll make it very, very easy, but that's all you've got to do. And then on Monday, after the Grand Prix, I will go through all of those replies to my Instagram post and pick out a winner. But don't forget, I need you as ever to use the hashtag. This week it's hashtag GPBRUS. Hashtag GPBRUS. That way I'll be able to find it. Good luck. This absolutely brilliant Russian Grand Prix print could be coming your way. Have a great weekend, guys. Enjoy the race, and I will speak to you very soon. Ta-da.